What's going on, Poppers? Welcome to Poppin Predictions, where we believe movies aren't over at the end, but are meant to be continued. You're here with Andy and Marqueze, where we ponder what happens in a story once the credits begin to roll. On today's episode, we will be reviewing the movie Smile. After witnessing a bizarre, traumatic incident involving a patient, a psychiatrist becomes increasingly convinced she's being threatened by an uncanny entity. This movie is rated R for strong, violent content and grisly images and language. You are able to watch this movie on Amazon Prime Video. Before going any further, we want to give a trigger warning. We are going to be discussing suicide ideation, self harm. So if you find that content kind of, you know, disturbing, like we would encourage you not to listen to the rest of this podcast. But that being said, Marquise, I am so glad to be back here with
Oh,
you. So
oh,
happy to be back recording. We got to do this
feels
more
so good.
often.
Yes, yes, yes.
Marquise, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about Smile?
Yeah, first off, Andy, it is great to be back. This feels amazing. Definitely got to pick this up again more. But yeah, so we'll get right into it. Smile came out in 2022. I think fall, probably sometime in the
Yeah, I
fall.
think
I
so.
think
I think September was the release date.
yeah, like 22. And so yeah, I remember seeing this movie this past fall. Going into it, I knew nothing about it. I just knew it was a horror film. That was it, and had
Mhm.
something with smiles. Um, yeah, so I genuinely like this film. Like
Mhm.
I thought it was pretty good. It was I guess I had low expectations just because I didn't know anything about it. But yeah, I didn't realize the themes it was gonna touch on, and
Mhm.
it plays the main theme. I would argue it touches on is trauma. Out of
Mhm.
everything,
Exactly.
is the theme of trauma and how trauma begets more trauma. And trauma is there's even a line in the movie where one of the characters says, you're never really over trauma. Like you can never get rid of it. You can only like learn to manage it. And yeah, it's kind of become like central to like how like I view this whole entire movie from the perspective of what is it saying, it's commentary on trauma,
Right.
and just how we deal with it as humans and how it pops back up in our lives. But yeah, they did it in like a fairly creative way, I thought. I've seen similar movies, but it was like fairly creative, and I thought it was done pretty well. Yeah, arguably, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. What about you?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was pretty interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the movie. So the movie
Mm-hmm.
itself starts off with I appreciate this movie because it kind of gets right off into the action.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of it starts off and it's in like this kind of like this like broken down house, and this woman is laying in bed and she's not doing too great. And the door opens and you see the daughter, or you see a girl. You just kind of you don't know the relationship. It's whatever. And not doing too great. You later find out that the little girl in that movie grows up to become the psychiatrist. And she's working at a hospital, working with students, not students, working with people who are having severe mental health issues. And it jumps straight into it where she is meeting with this girl named Laura,
Mm-hmm.
um, and this woman named Laura, like she is like deeply disturbed. You can tell that she is not doing well,
Mm-hmm.
and she is like no one believes me. Like she's like people just like I just see smiling images. People I know, people I don't know, like
Mm-hmm.
are smiling at me. And like at first, I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt like uh what's her name, Rose wasn't taking it seriously. Like she was just kind of going through the motions and
it
like asking the
felt it
questions.
felt super routine. It felt
Yeah,
like, all right, here's a patient. She's, very erratic right now. I might have to calm her down. Hey, whatever's going on with you, it's not real. It's not like she and like
yeah, she says
as the
that,
patient
she
says,
says that.
she says the patient says like it feels like you're not even listening to me, like you don't
Yeah,
believe me or
exactly.
whatever. And you could tell the way Rose responds still isn't with any passion. It's just like a very like lackadaisical response. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So she's just like no one is gonna believe me. And then as Rose is asking her probing questions, she Laura just starts like freaking out. almost like if you've watched like any sort of like poltergeist type movies, like where her body just looks like she's being possessed. And like Rose is like, oh my gosh, like she's like taking it a little, she's taking it a lot more seriously. And you see her start going towards, there's like a panic phone. You see her start going towards the phone, there's like call for help. And she looks up and she turns around, she sees Laura, and now Laura is smiling at her. She like Laura had knocked over a vase, she picked up one of the shards from the vase, and while she's smiling, she like slits her throat. And like she pretty gruesomely she
like goes slow
like gruesomely from one end of her throat to the other end, like
very with, slow, with a smile on her face the whole time.
It's like she doesn't really realize what is happening at that point. Like she has been involved, like she's been embraced and kind of taken over by this entity. And so seeing this trauma, like, you know, I have mixed feelings about this movie altogether, but you know, and Laura, not Laura, Rose goes home. She's having, you know, she's comforted by her fiance, who's A-Train from The Boys.
Yes. I was very interesting to see him outside The Boys.
I know. I was like, oh wow, okay, you know. But just a little fun fact there. You know, they're having a normal conversation, but you know, throughout the experience, she meets with investigators who call like the victim crazy. Like I remember like them like throughout the movie, like people are referring to what's going on as like crazy, unhinged, and stuff like that. So like they're trying to see, like they have plans to go out to dinner with Rose's sister and Rose's husband. Not Rose's husband, sorry, Rose's sister's husband. And they go out and they're like, well, why do you keep like working at this hospital? Like you should open up your own private practice. You don't have to deal with these crazies anymore. And throughout the movie, like more and more psychotic episodes like just keep happening, where like, you know, she keeps seeing people smile at her. So first she keeps seeing her mom, she sees Laura, she sees different people and things that she knows smiling at her, which is of course getting her, you know, deeper and deeper, you know, paranoid. You know, she was going to go to her nephew's birthday party and give her nephew a model train. But you know, Rose has a cat, and you know, she loses the cat somewhere. She doesn't know how. No one really, the movie doesn't really tell you what doesn't show you what happens. We find out what happens. So what ends up happening is, you know, the nephew Carl gets the present, opens it up, and you can see he's excited because he sees the box and it's like a model train company logo on the box, and he's like, oh, this is gonna be great. And you see the smile like go away, like drop, and like he's like kind of going to horror. He opens it up and he like takes the cat mustache out of the box. And what was disturbing about that scene, of course, with like the dead cat, was that like Rose is now like kind of like at this point really losing it. Like like there were things that were going on that was like getting her to this point, but at this point I would say that this is when she really starts needing to figure out what's going on. Like she's like, I need to investigate this further.
Because at first it's just her seeing things, like for the most part, and she's seeing things and like hearing things that like other people aren't seeing and hearing. So first it's like hallucinations, whatever. But this is like, wait, or someone else killed my cat and stuff in his box. Like, how did I not, like, this is like a much more serious. I'm doing stuff without happening.
She fell through like a glass table. She got hospitalized. Earlier in the movie, I kind of skipped this part, but earlier in the movie, like she has like one of the first episodes that she like sees a other patient. Sorry, the nephew's name wasn't Carl. The patient that she saw, his name was Carl. The patient, Carl, was like smiling at her
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "You're going to die. You're going to die." So then she called the hospital security on them, and then her boss was like, "You have a week off," and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how this whole thing kind of unfolded. But getting back on track, like she is trying to investigate it further, and she finds out that what she's experiencing, her patient Laura was experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and then she finds out that her patient Laura like witnessed her professor
Mm-hmm.
dying by suicide while also smiling. So then she investigates that further. She goes to the professor's house and speaks to the professor's wife, uh, who is Carla from Scrubs. Just throwing that out there. And she does really well. But she finds out that the professor saw someone else die by suicide right in front of him.
That's a
So
whole
then
chain of
it's a whole chain of events.
yeah.
So then she connects with her ex-boyfriend, Joel, who's a cop, and like finds out that this whole thing was a long string of people dying by suicides. There were 20 cases of it happening with 19 suicides, and only one person was able to break the curse.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes and meets with the person who is in prison because they murdered someone in front of another person who that person became part of the chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so just kind of going deeper and deeper,
And he lets
you
her
know,
know, like specifically, he tells her that the prisoner that Rose goes to see, like because he survived, he tells her the only way to skip for the curse to skip you is for you to kill somebody and for somebody else to watch
yeah,
because it
exactly.
has to pass on trauma.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you have to kill somebody, and somebody else has to see it in
Mm-hmm.
order to for that curse to skip you.
Exactly. So, um, not Laura, Rose is just trying to figure out what to do next. She goes, you see her go to the hospital, and she goes into the hospital, she goes and kills Carl
Mm-hmm.
in front of her boss, which then you're like, okay, cool, the curse got passed over to her boss. But there's also an of course her stabbing the patient in front of the boss is unsettling,
Yeah.
but the what was making it even more unsettling was that Carl began to smile,
Mm-hmm.
and the boss started ripping his own skin off in
Yeah.
front of her,
That was intense.
and then it kind of goes back, and Rose is sitting in the car, and she realizes that she has to be alone. um and we'll talk more in depth about how the movie ends, but she like drives off to
Yeah.
the woods, and I'm gonna leave that part because that's kind of when we'll start talking about the end. But when she drives off to the woods is when it really starts picking up.
Yeah.
So I know that you mentioned that you really like this movie. um what were some of the things that you really liked about it?
Yeah. So, like I said, they did, in my opinion, they did a really good job of kind of constantly emphasizing this theme of trauma begets trauma. So first with
Mm-hmm.
like she sees her patient kill herself, so now she all of a sudden is dealing with all these issues, and then she finds out it's a chain of things where anytime someone has like watched somebody or this entity, demon, whatever it is, in this movie, like will take control of a person and then have them smile and kill themselves in front of another person. Like they won't just
Mm-hmm.
kill themselves; it also needs to be in front of another
Yeah, it needs to
individual.
be like someone needs to see it.
Someone needs to see it, and so it's this idea of, once again, trauma begets trauma. And there's one that they don't really talk about a lot in the movie, but it's like really, I don't know. It's really interesting. Where it's the kid who receives a model car, her nephew, right? Or who's supposed to receive a model car, but instead it's the cat, the dead cat in the
Yeah.
box, right? So later on, there's a scene where Rose is talking to her sister, the nephew's mom, talking to her sister, and it's just like they're getting this argument, and then the sister, whose name is Holly, tells Rose like, "Hey, like you can't come around here anymore. You've already traumatized the boy enough, whatever, right?"
Yeah.
And then right after that scene, Rose goes in her car and is just freaking out. And she thought she saw something, so she's screaming and freaking out in the car. And the camera just goes to the house, and you see the little boy up in this room looking out the window, almost hyperventilating as he's seeing Rose
Yeah.
freak out in the car. And it's like, yeah, she really did pass on. Now, maybe not like the demon, but like actual trauma. She just passed on this trauma to this kid now, who is like saw his like like aunt going psychotic, and that's literally how the movie starts with Rose as a little kid seeing her mom in a psychotic state. And yeah, so like I don't know, I just think that.
And then something on top of that, I'm sorry to cut you up, but something else that's kind of interesting is that I don't know if it was the case with every victim, but at least from from Rose, from Laura, from the professor, we know that they had a parent. They mentioned in the movie that they had a parent
Oh, I didn't
that
even notice
also
that.
died by suicide in front of them.
I did
So
not
like
notice that.
that was
Huh.
another link that connected that
Yeah.
at least those three characters, that they had a parent that died by suicide in front of them.
Oh, did not notice that.
Um, Something that I really appreciate about the director. So the director's name is Parker Finn. He made two shorts. So before making this movie, the first short was called I don't know the order. So one of the shorts his name is The Hide Behind, and then the other one is Laura Hasn't Slept.
Oh.
And while doing a little bit of research for this movie and for this podcast, I haven't like personally watched the shorts, but I know that the shorts are kind of intended to be or can be viewed as prequels to this movie because they have
Oh.
very similar concepts. In fact, Laura from Laura Hasn't Slept is the same Laura
It's the same
in
one.
this
Yeah, I
movie.
figured.
And so like, and they have the same premise of like people smiling. Um, and it's just really interesting to kind of see him take his ideas from the shorts and make it into a full-fledged movie.
Mm-hmm.
I I enjoyed the movie. I think that for me I had some issues with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I really liked about the movie was the fact that it jumped in and like the sound design was really well. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
filmed really well. I
Mm-hmm.
think the writing for me is when I kind of
Mm.
that's when I feel kind of that's where my kind of complaints. I'm never super crazy. I never really enjoy. I don't really enjoy when movies play too hard into the stereotypes of like calling mental illnesses and like calling people who are impacted by mental
Mm-hmm.
illnesses as like crazy
Mm-hmm.
or unhinged. And I felt like, yeah, there are those stereotypes do exist, and there are people who, you know, who hold them. Um, but I felt like everyone outside of Rose had no concept of like mental illness and like the terminology that you should use and like
Mm-hmm.
just how you should treat people who have mental illnesses. So it just like just felt like it took me out of it a little bit with
Mm-hmm.
how they would refer to people. Um, and then I just felt like it's kind of funny like because of the fact that the horror aspect of it is people smiling the whole time I'm watching this movie. I'm like, the only reason that this movie's a horror film is because of the filter that they put on the camera. Like if they would like the music, like if they would have changed the music, if they would have changed the music and the filter on the camera, it could very easily be like a regular
It's a
movie
good movie
or
about
just like
trauma.
this is a regular. So it's just like I feel like I feel like in that aspect it kind of falls flat a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like overall it was a pretty good movie.
I mean, it's definitely not the scariest movie. Like, if you're looking to like be terrified, like this is not gonna
No,
like terrify you. Like, there's a few jump scares, and like there's a few like creeping, like oh, like what's gonna happen. But like overall, it's not the scariest film out there. I would say it's yeah, it's not the scariest film, but
I was
oh
gonna make a
gosh,
joke about like how like capitalism really comes into play here because like Rose literally witnessed one of her patients die by suicide right in front of her, and then she had to go to work the next day
yeah.
like without any sort of support. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. that's fine. I've, as an RD, served on call and have seen,
yeah,
not complete the act, but attempt the act in front of me. And
yeah,
I was like, I can't complete on call, but this person, she witnessed someone do it. She can go to work the next day.
yeah.
And then like the boss was like, you've been working 80-hour weeks for this past month. I'm like, that sounds very American. Like,
yeah,
like
like
just to have to work nonstop and then also show up to work the next day. Like the fact that the dinner plans weren't immediately canceled
that
because
was
of this whole
wild to
thing.
me.
I was just like, okay, like you should, as a psychiatrist, you should know that like you need this time to regroup. You should be consulting with another licensed professional. Like
Mm-hmm.
the fact that the movie didn't really do that kind of pulled me out of, again, another thing that kind of pulled me out of it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
of course, she went back and talked to her former counselor, Dr. Madeline Northcott, but like but she, like, aside from like having like one conversation about how she was going to resume it, that was kind of it. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
the doctor was kind of used as like a weapon against her
Mm-hmm.
by Trevor, her fiance. Like, be like, yo, like, you're unhinged, I brought your doctor in here to help you. It just felt like another. I know that there's, obviously I understand the movie, I understand it's a horror movie, and with that being said, like, it's not gonna be super realistic, but I felt like this movie was trying to be put in a world where like it is somewhat realistic with
Mm-hmm.
some supernatural entities entwined with it. And
Mm-hmm.
because like the realistic things weren't there, like it kind of
Mm-hmm.
just didn't mesh really well. And then I
Mm-hmm.
also felt like there were certain times where the movie was trying to be like one of those horror movies that has comedy to break the tension, but the
Mm-hmm.
comedy was kind of cheesy and kind of
Yeah,
like
the comedy wasn't really there like
cringy.
that.
Like there was like one time where like Joel comes in to check in on her after comes in to check in on Rose.
I know what part you're talking
And
about.
like one of the nurses was like, she's engaged, right? And he's like, yeah, I know. And then the nurse is like, well, I'm not, I'm single. And I'm just like,
yeah.
okay, that like was not necessary. Like it did not fit the movie
Well,
at all. So
I got a question for you. What did
what's
you
up?
think of the therapist character, or not therapist, Rose, the psychiatrist,
Yeah,
Dr. Madeline
that Matt.
Northcott?
Yeah,
What did you think of her?
I I thought that she was very interesting. I think that she brought in um like a unique perspective, and I think that she was like needed
Mm-hmm.
for some of the twists that this movie had.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like she needed to be there to kind of like be the person that Rose could go to for mental health support, even though she wasn't utilized enough.
Mm-hmm.
She could have been there. But then also like the scene where like she is there trying to make sure that she is okay and
Mm-hmm.
like not a danger to herself or others, and then turns out to be one of the visions from the smile curse.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought that was like really important. um but yeah, I thought that it was a really necessary character, and I think that the actress that did a really good job.
Yeah, I thought she did great too. I thought that she's the because with Rose being the psychiatrist, she's kind of like the authority and like what's going
Mm,
on type thing. But now you give another character that has a little more authority than her, like her psychiatrist, to say, okay, this is what's going on. This isn't what's going on. Like Rose, calm down, blah blah blah. And like the first time we meet her, we see that apparently Rose hasn't been going to her for a while
yeah,
because the psychiatrist says like I think it'd be good if we resumed our regular sessions. But
yeah,
Rose
and
came just to get a prescription for a pill.
yeah,
What are you gonna say?
yeah. Now I was just gonna say, and Rose was just like, yeah, okay, I'll continue, but then that was kind
Yeah,
of
she
it.
just kind of said it. But one thing that I like during that initial conversation they have is Rose like it's kind of like the kind of cliche for psychiatrists and stuff like that. It's like always trying to bring everything back to your childhood, you know. And
Mm,
then so she's trying to like, what do you think this is about your mother's death or your mother's suicide or whatever? And um the Rose is like, I'm over that. It's not about that. Something else is happening to me. But then yeah, I'm over that. But then Dr. Northcott goes, we're never over trauma. Like you're never
mm-hmm,
truly over it. You can only
mm-hmm,
learn to manage it. And right now, I think that you're under a high amount of stress and all this other stuff, and then that is unlocking previous trauma now. Once again,
mm-hmm.
that you might have thought you were over. And so then like the rest of the movie from that point on kind of goes on this idea of like, okay, there's this, you know, quite literal demon like on me that's, you know, kind of tearing me down. And causing her to go into these like, you know, psychotic moments. But Rose towards the end like realizes that she needs to actually deal with her previous trauma as a child in order to get through this. Which I guess takes us towards the end of the film if you want to go ahead and
Yeah,
get
so
on
the
that.
ending of the movie goes, the way that the ending of the movie goes is, you know, Rose leaves the hospital as we
Mhm,
kind of pick up from our previous synopsis. Like Rose is leaving the hospital and she is talking to Joel, and Joel's trying to find out where she is, and she's like, I just need to be alone. I just need to be alone. And so she like hangs up the phone with him. And she pulls up onto this house. And at first, I don't know if it was just me, but I didn't realize where she was going. It just kind of like looked like, again, like a really just like a really like rundown house. You really later then are you really find out then later that she goes back to her childhood home, because it's in a very remote area,
mhm,
and that's kind of where she chooses to. I don't know if she intends on living in isolation. It's kind of unclear like what her motive or what her purpose of being at the house is, other than to be in an isolated place.
mhm.
You don't know if like that's where she like if she's like intending to live there forever, or if she's like, I'm gonna face this demon here.
Yeah, that's
but
kind of weird.
in any event, she ends up back at the house, and she's like going through the house, and the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is, that's not a terrible idea. Like, don't, that's not a bad idea. But
Well, you
she
can't tell if like if she's doing it because she realizes that like, oh, like alone, like if I'm a like this thing needs someone else to watch me in order for me to pass it, for me to kill myself. So you can't tell if she's being selfish and if she's being, or actually I don't know if selfish is the word, but
selfless.
well, no, both. Like she could be being selfish and being like, hey, if I'm by myself, that means this demon won't kill me because there's no one to watch.
Right.
But then she could also be looking out for other people, being like, oh, if I'm by myself, then someone else is going to get traumatized and get this past them.
Well, I
So
think both
it kind
perspectives
of,
is still pretty
yeah,
selfless, and
yeah,
not.
you know.
I think it's pretty selfless, not self. Like either way, like no matter
Mm,
what perspective there. But in any event, she like opens. She goes to the mom's room. She's actually like going through the house first, and
mm-hmm,
she's just kind of like getting a lay of the land. She goes into I guess the garage or the shed,
mm-hmm,
whatever that's inside the house, and she sees like a bunch of like kerosene cans. She sees a lamp. She sees a bunch of other stuff, and that kind of comes into things later. She goes into the mom's bedroom, and that's where she sees her mom there lying in bed. She's talking with her. And at first, the mom is being very sweet and just like, I'm sorry that I did this to you. I wasn't the best mom. I wish I could be better. And like Rose, just like, I don't buy any, like, she doesn't say this, but she's like, I don't buy this. Like, you were a pretty terrible mom. Like, in
mm-hmm.
fact, like, you're not even real. Like, you're not real. And I think she asks like, why are you here, or something like that. But I know that at some point the spirit is just like, your mind is so enticing, like your mind is like incredible, like she really
Mm-hmm,
likes living in her mind.
mm-hmm,
And the mom attacks Rose. Like she goes attacks Rose, and at some point, like you see her mom go from like a normal sized human being with a normal sized face to like she really was eating her vegetables, because she grew to like 11 feet tall,
yeah.
and she's like her face gets all distorted, and she's like fighting her. She's strangling her,
Looks like a
um
literal demon at this
like a
point.
literal demon at this point. And so Rose grabs the lantern that she has with her and smashes her
Mm-hmm.
over the face with the lantern, and she escapes. And then it kind of transitions to her being in Joel's apartment.
Right?
She is,
Does the house burns down in
yeah,
that, right?
she's the house is getting, she watches the house burn down.
With the demon
And
inside.
something that I thought was interesting during this was that the roof caves in. And the way that the roof caves in, I don't know if it was intentional or if I'm reading too into it, but it looked like the way that the roof caved in, it was making a smile out of the roof.
No, I never noticed that.
And again, I don't know if it was just like intentional or not, but or if I'm just reading too into it, but it looked like it was making a smile out of the roof. And then it transitions to her being in Joel's apartment, and it looks like she is having like a coming, like she like a realization that like she was living in past trauma, that
Mm-hmm.
she apologizes to Joel for everything, and it looks like everything is heading towards a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
And then it doesn't. She like apologized. It seems like she's going to get back together with Joel, but then Joel starts smiling, and so then
The smile.
she like the smile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she leaves the apartment, and you find out that she is still in the house or outside the house. She sees Joel pull up. She runs back into the shed, and like she locks the door to try to keep Joel out, because I think that she at this point she realizes that like she's either going to die or like something bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So she's confronting the demon. Joel runs up to the door and breaks in, and then Joel sees Rose like covered in kerosene, like doused in kerosene, like
Mm-hmm.
lights a match, has a huge smile on her face, and like the movie goes to Joel's face, zooms in on his eyes, who is now in like complete horror, as and you see in the reflection of his eyes like Rose setting
Burning,
herself on
yeah.
fire. And then the movie ends there.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, Marquise, I have some thoughts on how this movie can continue, but I'd really like to know, have you thought about what sort of like next steps could happen now that the movie's over?
Yeah. Well, okay. So first, let me comment on that ending
Yeah,
though.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So, I like the idea of her like literally facing her demons.
Right.
Like she gets enough like physical struggle with it, and then she's like, "This is my brain, blah blah blah. I'm gonna take control of it, blah blah blah," and like smashes the lamp on its head or whatever, and then goes and watches it burn and everything like that. And then she's like, I beat my demons. Like we're good.
Exactly.
I'm over it. Can I just go and can I rest with you? Turns out, nope, no, you didn't. And then she's right back there. And once again, like it's playing along with the whole theme of the movie, which is like you're never really done with trauma. Like that
Right.
it's going to it keeps coming up. And if you leave it unmanaged, it will just keep popping up. But they do it at the very last scene with the whole thing being a hallucination, basically. And once she kind of snaps right back into it and she's staring at the house and Joel's just calling her name, and then she runs in or
The
whatever.
demon like the demon like climbs into her mouth, like literally
Yeah, yeah, the
like
demon.
rips the skin off, climbs into her mouth, very
Yeah,
similar to how like her boss ripped his skin off. Like the demon
yeah,
does that, and then like I think that's the point where she gets taken over
yeah.
by
Like
by the smile.
possessed by this demon. And so I'll just let it know right now. My biggest criticism of this movie kind of fits with this ending, and my biggest
Mm-hmm.
criticism of this movie, for me, honestly, is the fact that, and I just don't like it when movies do this in general, unless they have like a really good reason. And to me, this one didn't. Is I don't like when you give the main character, whoever reviewing the lens through this, you give them you make them psychotic, or you give them a reason to not experience like true reality or whatever, and so therefore we can never trust what they see. And for me, it's kind of like a cop out writing technique. So like you can like, oh, I'm gonna make this like cool like thing, oh, none of that was real. I'm gonna do this and
Exactly.
that, oh, none of that was real, and then we're just gonna go on this path. And it's just kind of like, like it's kind of like when people like
It's like this. It was like an all. It was like this was all a dream, sort of like
yeah,
ending, sort
it's
of
like
thing.
it's like to me that's a I don't want to say like the writer's own skill, but like to me that's like a lack of writing skill. Like
Yeah.
Write your way out of that scenario better than this all happened. Oh wait, no, it didn't. Like it's just kind of like you could pull that off like once in a movie, and like if there's like a good like reason, but like this wasn't the first time. Like there's like 3 times so far in this movie, I think maybe even 4, until this point where like she thinks something's happening and it's not. Like she thinks she's talking with her psychiatrist, and then finds out she gets a phone call and finds out, oh, that's not her psychiatrist because right in front of her, and like
Yeah.
all this stuff like that. And so that's my one of my biggest things. It's like I kind of like, don't get me wrong, I like, so personally I like dark endings. So I like the fact that like it ended with the trauma being passed to another person. I'm actually kind of happy it did, and it didn't just end with her. Like I kind of like the fact that she didn't beat her demons, but I don't like how they did it. I don't.
Yeah, I think that it could have been more impactful
They could have found a
if
better
like
way.
I to me, and I kind of I feel similarly. I feel like they didn't know how to end it.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like that whole final sequence, like when she is leaving the hospital, like that's when it starts like really kind of going downhill when it's like in terms of like not knowing how to end. I think that like I'm all for like leaving an ambiguous ending, whether like I think that this movie could have actually benefited from having a more ambiguous ending.
Yeah, honestly, it could have.
Like not
I agree.
knowing if the curse got passed on or not. Like it really could have potentially ended with like instead of going back to the house, like maybe like there's some sort of clue that like she actually passed the curse on to Trevor, some not Trevor, onto Joel somehow. Or like I don't know, just something that makes you question whether or not like the curse was passed on or not, and that you would have we'd have a conversation on like did was Joel cursed or not? Like we would have that kind of conversation. Now we know that Joel's cursed. Like
Mm-hmm.
Joel got it passed on to him,
Yeah.
and it's more of like a what happens now? Like does Joel knowing that now 20 people have lost their lives to this thing, does he just die there? Like does he try to kill himself there? Does he try to do something else to figure out? Like that's kind of where we're left with this sort of
Oh,
interesting.
because Rose never tells him what she learned from the prisoner, does she?
No,
So he doesn't
no,
even know that so he can murder somebody and get
he
away from
doesn't
them.
know
He
that.
doesn't
He
even know
doesn't
that.
know. So
That's
like
right. Yeah.
that's
You
I'm
can
just
see
I
the
guess
secret from him.
I'll
Yeah,
go
go, go,
with
you go,
my
you go, you
prediction.
go.
So I have a couple of theories. I'm going to go with like the most like simple one first because that's going to take me the least amount of time. So obviously there are two routes that Joel can go from here.
Mm-hmm.
Because Joel does know about like I think Joel knows about everything except for like he could if he wanted to murder someone to pass like in front of somebody else. He does know about like the 19 other victims that have died by suicide, and he knows about the smile curse. Like he's actually the one person that believes Rose in
Mm-hmm.
this entire movie. Which is why I think that Rose was so connected to him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he can make the choice of dying there, or the next movie could be like him trying to break the curse and then trying to figure out how that's done. I think the more interesting perspective would be like he knows that the prisoner was connected to this case altogether, and he goes back to the prison and like finds a way. He's a cop. He could
Yeah, he could
make
get back in there.
he could figure out a way to break this person out of the prison
Mm-hmm.
and like try to break the curse that way with the person. And I think that that would be pretty interesting just to kind of follow along with Joel and the prisoner, and see how they're able to fight the curse together, having two people together that know about the curse
Mm-hmm.
versus like somebody who had no idea and then like had to try to figure out along the way. I think that that could be an interesting dynamic. But what I think and what I would really love from Smile 2 is if the movie was from the perspective of the curse and not from the victim.
Yo,
And so
explain.
so I think that part of what we found out from Rose's conversation was that like this was not the first time that this has happened, that this has happened before with different people in different places. And so I think that it would be really interesting if like the curse was like, I need to spread to as many people as possible. And was like, how can I do that? Like trying to figure out like how that it could get spread to as many people as possible. What is one live event that everyone watches that does not have any sort of delay? Like I'm asking you.
Uh,
New Year's ball drops.
oh.
So like what I'm thinking is that the curse like impacts somebody who works in like the media industry and is um like is like maybe it's like a news, it's got to be like a news anchor, someone who is involved with that.
Mhm.
And maybe Joel is trying, like he knows about the curse and Joel's trying to stop whatever from happening there.
Mhm.
And what happens in the movie is that maybe someone dies live on camera, and having all millions and
That
millions
would
of
be
people
wild.
watch this, like they have to stop that from happening. And I think that that would be really interesting to just see like how that would play out. What happens if it succeeds? Then they have to try to stop a mass, like they have to stop it from spreading at like a
Yeah.
mass level. I think that that would be so intense and so interesting. I think that that would be like the next
Yo.
level of smile.
Yeah, I like that so much more about it. But I like the idea that like Joel goes to like New York or whatever for like the ball drop,
I mean, they're in
and
New
like
Jersey, so they're right there
they're right
anyway.
there, yeah. Goes to New York for the ball drop, and like just completely like just like yeah, does something wild in front of like the cameras or something like that. And
Yeah.
then all these people, and then like you have this mass like group of people who are all having psychotic visions, who are all
Yes.
dying before the weekend. Oh yeah, and that's another thing in this movie they specifically mentioned like no one's lasted more than a week. You
Yeah.
know.
They don't set that you they don't say that you have a week, but they like Marky, like you
Mm-hmm.
just said, like no one's lasted longer than a week. Some people
Mm-hmm.
have lasted less than like a
Mm-hmm.
day. Some people have but no one's lasted longer than a week, which I appreciate because there have been a lot of movies that are like you have 7 days to figure this out. Like
Yeah.
this one is like no one's lasted longer than 7 days. It's like 7 days or less,
Yeah,
basically, is how long it
basically.
takes.
But I'm trying to, so like I'm wondering, so like who would be the protagonist who oh wait a minute. What I like better actually, instead of Joel killing himself in front of like people for New Year's Eve, Joel, okay, wait,
Okay,
hold on.
okay, okay, okay,
We could kind of blend the two. We could kind of blend the two. So
okay.
Joel goes back to the prison to find the good one guy that survived, right?
Right.
And he like forces them to give him the information that Joel he gave Rose, and so he lets him know the same thing. He's like, you got to kill somebody and like brutally in front of people in order for this thing to move on. And so Joel goes all out, and Joel doesn't even recognize that it's New Year's Eve. He's not doing this on purpose. He doesn't even
Right.
recognize that it's New Year's Eve. He just it happens to be New Year's Eve or whatever. And like he's like, I just need to go and I need to get this off of me. And so he goes, kills somebody, has no idea, doesn't realize like this is in front, like he thinks that he's killing somebody in front of like the people maybe around him, or one of them is going to be traumatized. What he doesn't realize is like it's in front of a camera, and that there's way more people watching than just who's around him, and that's how it affects like everybody. And now it's his job to stop it because he's the one that now passed it on to all these millions of viewers, and Joel has to find some way to like end this curse for good, not just keep passing it on.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. That's
Dude,
really cool.
we should write the script for Smile
We
too.
should write this. We got this. We got this. Um, that being said, I really want to know how you would rate this movie. So,
Yeah.
how it's been a very long time since we've brought out the popcorn buckets. So for our new listeners to our current listeners, if you need a refresher, we rate movies off of a popcorn bucket scale.
Mm-hmm.
The Poppin popcorn scale. And so if we give a movie a small bucket, think of it as like a 1 to 3. The movie's really not worth it. Like it's not really worth your time. If we give it a medium bucket, think of it like a 4 to 6. Like it's like worth the watch. But like maybe like towards the bottom of your like movie, like your watch list. If you give it a large bucket, um, if we give it a large bucket, that means that like it's like a 7 to 9. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely worth being in the top 3 of your like the next movie that you should watch. And if
Mm-hmm.
we give it a big bucket, 10 out of 10. Stop what you're doing, put a smile on your face and watch this movie right now. So Marquise, that being said, where would you rank Smile on the Poppin popcorn scale?
For me, Smile would be medium with butter.
Okay,
I think
gotcha.
I think it's not good enough for me to put a large, like, hey, like you need to see this. This is I thought it was interesting. Like it was a cool movie with like an interesting like concept. And I felt like it executed it fairly well. It wasn't spectacular or anything. It's more so for me the theme. Like I
Mm-hmm,
just love, but same with Midsommar being my favorite movie, like the theme of
mm-hmm.
like not trauma necessarily. Well, actually, yeah, trauma, but even more so like empathy and community and trauma. And so this fully diving into trauma as a central theme kind of is more what got me into it. And then how trauma begets trauma. So like to be honest, my favorite thing about this movie was the theme of it more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the execution, could be wanted
Could
for
have been
more.
better.
But yeah. What about you?
Gotcha. So before I get my ranking, I want to let everyone know that the way that we did this movie was a little bit different than how we normally have done movies in the past. Normally, when we've done the podcast, we will watch the movie together.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that I not sure if I appreciate, but something that I think in something that was kind of a pro to doing it separately this time, because this time we watched it separately,
Mm-hmm.
was that I feel like I was able to watch it without, not to say that like you inherent like you purposely put your bias into
But
mine,
we both influence each
but
other
we
when it comes
influence
to
each other
how we react to the movie
how
and
we react to
everything. Yeah.
movies. And so that being said, I told you before we started recording that like I feel like I have a very controversial rating.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that this is the best small bucket movie we have ever seen. I'm going to give this a small bucket.
Okay, okay.
Um, the reason I'm giving it a small bucket is because I feel like this movie is just like too generic.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of movies have done this whole like there's like a spirit that you have to fight and you have to try to figure out how to defeat it.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of curses have like, oh, no one believes me, but then there's the one person that randomly does. And
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of movies have like the same sort of tropes
Mm-hmm.
that this movie kind of puts on, and this movie doesn't really do anything unique enough
Mm-hmm.
to really add to the genre. I think the most unique part about this movie is the fact that everyone smiles. Like I think that's probably the one thing that kind of separates it from other ones. But like the jump scares were pretty like predictable.
Yeah.
I would say like there wasn't really much of like there wasn't like a huge twist. Like there were
Mm-hmm.
like things that happened that were like, oh wow, like I didn't see it coming, but like in the context of the movie makes sense. Like the like Rose's psychiatrist not actually being real, like the home security system, who we didn't talk a lot about yet, but if you
Mm-hmm.
watch the movie, like you'll see like there's like a home security person that like wasn't real. Like it's just like wasn't unique enough to make it
Mm-hmm.
worth watching. Like I feel like if you watched another movie, like if you watched Final Destination, like that was one of the movies that I felt like was really relatable, like that you can't escape death, like that death is like inevitable for everybody. Like I
Mm-hmm.
felt like as I was watching the movie I was like, okay, this is basically like Final Destination with smiles.
Mm-hmm.
um
I mean, honestly,
and
I was, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so like for me, like it's hard because like I did enjoy it, and like compared to my other small buckets that I've given, like I wouldn't like tell people this is the worst movie ever, but I would also like warn people like don't expect to be blown away. Like if you want to
Mhm.
watch it, that's fine. It's definitely like worth the watch, but
Mhm.
I don't think that you need to just because a movie is like entertaining. And I think that this was what I was going like thinking about it as I was kind of trying to figure out where I'd rank it. Just because a movie is entertaining, which this movie definitely is,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's a like a good movie, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Mhm.
Like so for me it's like a small bucket with like extra butter
Mhm.
because like it is worth the watch, but I would never say yeah you need to watch this movie.
That makes sense. That makes total sense.
But
Yeah.
that being said, we would really love to know what you all thought of the movie Smile if you saw it. Do you agree with our like our interpretation? Do you feel like we missed something? I know that there were plenty of details and plenty of plots that we just like couldn't go into just because if we did we'd be here forever.
Ever.
So like I'd love to know your thoughts. We are, I'm not sure if we're how and get active we're going to be. I know that we're talking about being more active again in the
Mhm.
summer, because we're going to both find ourselves with more time comes, May through August. So
Mhm.
we'd love to know your thoughts, movie recommendations. You can follow us on Twitter at Pop and Predict and Instagram at popandpredictions.pod.
Mhm.
We're also going to be on YouTube.
So leave
You know,
comments. This will be on
leave
YouTube.
comments, leave comments, let us know. But yeah, Marquise, any final thoughts before we go?
One, like I said, it was great to be back. Great to do this
Yeah,
again. But yeah, I pretty much agree with your last analysis. Even though I give it a medium with butter, I still agree overall with that. Yeah, it's like even though I did tell people to watch this movie, I told them to watch it more because I thought it was entertaining.
yeah,
Not because like, oh, this is gonna blow your mind. This is the next level, horror
yeah,
film. Like, no, it was entertaining. It was fun to watch. And I like horror that comes from like the mental health aspect. Like any
exactly.
horror genre that touches on, or any horror movie that focuses on the mental health as like the basis of it, like it's already gonna like it's kind of like I'm biased towards it for that reason. So for
Yeah.
that, otherwise I probably would have given it a small. But yeah, so if topics of like mental health and then also like horror or like your thing, like you might enjoy
Send
this
us
as much.
recommendations for that. We both love those types of
Please,
movies. So
please, please, please.
so that being said, until next time, keep popping, everyone.
Have a good one.